Canada is in the south of Afghanistan, as is Australia. Kandahar is one of the most difficult provinces of the country. And we have found ourselves in an extremely difficult and dangerous situation. So we felt it was necessary, and the parties felt it was necessary, to set some clear goals and a time frame for that military commitment.
Is the simple truth of it that this commitment to Afghanistan is becoming a bit of a poison chalice for governments like yours, as you say, doing some of the heavy lifting in some of the most dangerous provinces of Afghanistan? We've had very recent example of political pressure caused by ongoing commitment with the Dutch government, the coalition that fell apart just last week because of wrangling over whether Dutch troops should extend their stay or not. I mean, this is a real political question for contributing countries now, isn't it?
Each country has to make up its own mind as to what it's willing to do to contribute towards the stability and security of Afghanistan. Canada went into this commitment starting in 2006 with the Provincial Reconstruction Team in Kandahar. And we are making a huge commitment in terms of development assistance. Afghanistan is the largest recipient of Canadian development assistance, almost $2 billion over 10 years. And as you've pointed out, also in terms of the cost of Canadian lives.
Is there a simple political equation here, though, that if the lives lost had been fewer, then Canadians might have been more relaxed about the troop commitment extending?
The troop commitment and the development assistance commitment were made back in a time when we didn't have such a large number of casualties. So we made that commitment not knowing what the impact was going to be on the Canadians serving in Afghanistan.
Is it fair to say that the Taliban has time on its side in this war? They know that, for instance, Canada and the Dutch will withdraw. Others have already withdrawn. They know the US public's patience with the war is not unlimited. They just need to just hold on, survive in order to win this. Does that make this the unwinnable war?
I don't think so, Fran. First of all, we cannot win the war in Afghanistan. Afghans have got to win the war. So we have got to be there to support those Afghans who want to build the kind of future that we've been trying to build with them. We're part of a coalition of 44 countries working in Afghanistan. Increasing number of countries are making more commitments to Afghanistan, actually, at this point in time. And one thing that isn't often pointed out is the toll on the Taliban themselves. The Taliban leaders and commanders who are being killed. So I think that it is, in fact, the case that the Taliban are suffering a huge amount themselves.
How is it going, in your view, the job of getting the Afghan forces up to a point where they can take over? Has it been slower than Canada might have hoped?
I don't think any of us appreciated what the impact of decades of civil war has been on the country. You have generations of people who've had no education. You have an illiteracy rate of over 70%. So it does take a different type of training to bring the Afghan National Security Forces up to snuff. But we are seeing that. We're working very closely with the Afghan National Police. And for example, most of the policemen are illiterate. We've started a literacy training program for the Afghan police. I was at a district police station in Kandahar, and they explained to me that one of the police officers had just recently identified a car because he was able to read the license plate. So he has good enough literacy that he can be a policeman. And that's what we're seeking to achieve in terms of the training.
And of course you need to have a degree of stability in a country before you can do things like hold literacy classes. The Australian forces have been operating in the Uruzgan province, and there's been a reconstruction task force, given a lot of military protection, if you like, by Dutch forces operating there too. We now know they'll be pulling out in August. The Australian government says it will not take over the lead role in the Uruzgan province. Canadian troops are down in that region generally, operating out of Kandahar. Will Canada help take up that role? Has Canada been asked to?
Canada, to my knowledge, has not been asked to expand its role, and we have a commitment until the end of 2011. I had the honor of visiting the Aussie troops 2 weeks ago to see some of the work that they're doing, and it really is impressive what your forces are doing in terms of police training. You've also set up a trades training center in Uruzgan. And I hope that the Australians will continue to be there making these kinds of commitments. But you're right, it will have to be determined who else is going to go in there and supply that additional military force over the next 18 months.
And what's the latest thinking? I mean, presumably there's a fairly ferocious negotiation going on over this.
I don't know what the decisions are within ISAF, the International Security Assistance Force, which brings together all of the allies fighting in Afghanistan. The next 18 months will be a crucial period of time for the country. You've pointed out to the troop surge. There's also a surge in terms of development assistance. I do want to point out, though, that Canada's commitment to Afghanistan is long-term. We've said that we will withdraw our troops at the end of 2011, but Afghanistan will continue to be a major recipient of Canadian development assistance.
In your view, is it good enough for Australia to say that it will not take over the lead role in the province of Oruzgan? Should Australia contribute more in terms of troop numbers or leadership?
Yeah. I think it really is an individual national decision when we're putting the lives of our own citizens on the line to determine whether or not we're able to put more into Afghanistan. And down the road in 18 months, when the troop surge starts to reduce, we'll see what the security situation is. And if things go according to plan, there will be less need for combat troops in Afghanistan.
There has been real frictions and very public frictions within the NATO-ISAF alliance between the countries involved. Now the US Defence Secretary Robert Gates has said recently that a crisis exists in the NATO alliance. He described what, really amounts to a wave of pacifism, in his view, sweeping through Europe's political class. He said large swathes of the general public and the political class in Europe are averse to military force and the risks that go with it, making it difficult for the US to operate and fight to confront shared threats. Do you agree with that? There is a reluctance within the European countries to step up, I suppose.
There is a lack of public support in Canada, in Europe, for combat troops to be in Afghanistan. But I think that just reflects the fact that we don't want to be in a country fighting. However, we recognize, those of us who are on the ground in Afghanistan, those of us who are seeking to support Afghans, that this is a very violent place, that the insurgents will use any form of intimidation, and hence you need to be prepared to use military force. But it's not popular.
Do you agree with the Secretary of State from the United States that European countries are reluctant, that there is a political reluctance, if you want, to get engaged in the hard fighting?
I think that reluctance is not just shared by Europeans. As I said, the majority of opinion in Canada would have us withdraw more quickly if we could, although Canadians do accept that we established a time frame within which we would leave, and they committed to that.
As the world grapples with trying to get some kind of resolution and peace in Afghanistan, the recent London conference committed to spending $500 million basically to pay low-level Taliban to abandon fighting, a bit of a restructuring, if you like. The so-called $10 Taliban, who are poorly paid but depend on the limited money that they receive because they are part of the insurgency. You have some reservations about that strategy.
Yes, I mean, I think it'd be unfair to characterize it as paying off the Taliban, because frankly, I don't think we're going to be able to win this war with the Afghans just by paying money. We've got to persuade them that there is an alternative for them to return to society, to give up their violence, to accept the government's authority. And when I was in Kandahar recently and talking to young people in Kandahar and asked them their sources of optimism, one thing that they said to me is, more Kandaharis, people who live in the province of Kandahar, those who most support the Taliban, now realize that there is an alternative to violence. And that's what we want to hear. That's what we want to hear insurgents saying and recognizing, that they can work with foreigners and with other Afghans to build up their society.
You sound very positive about a future likely outcome in Afghanistan. Is that fair to say?
I would say that the news tends to cover violent incidents. It does not cover all of that success that is happening. People going to school, better health clinics, more economic activity, and more confidence among Afghans that they can take control of their own future.
And just very briefly, Canadian troops, do they feel their efforts have been worth it?
You'd have to ask the Canadian troops. I talk to them, and they will tell you individual stories about what they see in terms of progress. The lives that have been saved, the women who have education, the children who are getting inoculated against polio.